Okay. Governor Northam issued Executive Order 53 restricting public gatherings of greater than 10 persons according to Code 2.2-3708-2A3 permits public bodies to meet electronically to discuss business required or necessary to operation of the public body in discharge of its lawful purposes, duties, and responsibility in times of emergencies and to address COVID-19. Therefore, this meeting is being held electronically pursuant to Virginia law because the COVID-19 pandemic makes it impracticable and unsafe to assemble a quorum physically in a single location. Okay. So can I get a roll call of commissioners?
Commissioner Wicks. Commissioner Wicks.
Present.
Commissioner Payne.
Here.
Commissioner Parker. Commissioner Green.
Here.
Commissioner Goldblatt. Chair Henry.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll just do a moment of silence. Okay, so now then I'm going to turn to our announcements, and our next CRHA board work session is Thursday, February 10th at 4 p.m. Excuse me, 5 p.m. And the CRHA regular meeting is Monday, February 28th at 6 p.m. And it's actually going to be in 2022. Okay, so safety meetings are every other Tuesday, and the next one being February 1st and February 15th, and then March 1st, and all are at 6 p.m. And you can get the passcode, I guess it's on the Facebook page. Then the redevelopment committee meeting is every other Thursday of the month at 4 p.m. And the next regular meeting will be February the 3rd and then February the 17th. Resident services is every second Tuesday of the month at 1 p.m. And their next one is February 8th. And then the maintenance / I guess that's parallel track committee meeting is, it says join the Zoom meeting, and there's no particular date given at this time. The personnel committee is every third Tuesday of the month at 2 o'clock. And then the finance committee is still to be arranged. Did anyone else have any other announcements? Okay, so then we want to hear from public comments, followed by FAR comments.
Sorry, that's me. I forgot. I'm doing double duties today. If you have, welcome to the CRHA regular meeting. If you would like to speak during the public comment period, please raise your hand. This is starting with FAR, so Shelby Edwards, I will allow you to talk right now. Shelby, if you unmute.
Good evening, everyone. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
All righty. My name is Shelby Marie Edwards. I use she, her, and hers, and I'm the Executive Director of FAR, the Charlottesville Public Housing Association of Residents. We are the duly recognized and federally mandated housing association. We are pleased to give an update on what our organization has done in collaboration with our residents since the last board meeting. FAR is continuing to host camera-related meetings with the intention of receiving more feedback from residents on the camera policy created by CRHA. On January 20th, 2022 at 1 p.m., we hosted a virtual meeting which was attended by 8 individuals, and it lasted roughly an hour and a half. We plan to have 2 more, one occurring tomorrow at 1 p.m. and the other at 1 p.m. this Friday, January 28th. Both will be via Zoom. We plan to bring the feedback to the Safety Committee for further consideration, so we are looking forward to active CRHA participation in future Safety Committee meetings. We are looking forward to having more robust conversations about the capital fund plan in the coming weeks. We plan to also have a large amount of resident engagement in that area as well. I also know that last meeting I commented on the need for CRHA to address more maintenance requests, both on the day-to-day as well as systems concerns, and we are pleased to learn that the maintenance committee will be up and running soon, and we look forward to continuing to work on these issues together. It is a pleasure for FAR to amplify the voices of the people. I appreciate the audience of the CRHA Board of Commissioners. Thank you so much and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you. The next person to talk will be Dee Dee Smith. Welcome to the CRHA regular board meeting.
Okay, I think I am oh no, you are muted. Let's see. Hold Alt. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're unmuted. You're
Oh,
good.
I am unmuted. Okay, great. Thank you. This is Dee Dee Smith. I live in Fry Springs in the city, have for 40 years. And I'm just here tonight to just let you know about a situation that has come up recently that I'm going to be speaking to tomorrow at the Ravenna Water and Sewer Authority. And it is a project that really has only recently been introduced, whereby Ravenna, and which has had zero public input or even, the ability to give public input. And it is a project to put a 5-mile, 24-inch pipe along the south side of the railroad tracks from Fry Spring to 6th Street and up to High Street, and the goal of which is to link the observatory water treatment plant with Pantops, all of which is on the north side of Charlottesville. And for some reason, they think it's wise to come over the railroad tracks on the west side, all the way across the south side of Charlottesville and back up to High Street instead of going north of the railroad tracks. I've been following this now. I've been trying to get information, but they've not been very cooperative. There is a meeting tomorrow, which I'll be speaking to. But basically the route goes from Fry Springs down JPA, down Cleveland, all the way across Cherry Avenue, past both schools, both parks, then down Elliott, past Mount Zion, up 6th Street, right past First Street, 6th Street, and Friendship Court. It's going to take a little jog and go up to High Street. There is no benefit to this pipe for our South Side community. None, zero. There is benefit for the north side of Charlottesville, and there's a lot of benefit for the county, north and east. I find it outrageous that there's been absolutely no community input even sought or allowed. So anyway, I'm following this and I just wanted to bring it to your attention because it impacts y'all. And happy to answer any questions at any time or present more later if you're interested. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. The next speaker is Kimber Hawking. If you please unmute yourself, you'll be able to talk.
Hi, can everybody hear me? Yes, I'm also here to second everything that Dee Dee Smith has mentioned. I myself have been contacted by a few people about this just recently. We knew nothing about it. I live in the Belmont Carlton neighborhood as well. And I'm just rather dazed and confused why the public was not involved in this. Also concerned about a benefit which appears to be to the north side of town and Pantops, which is in the county, and why the southern part of town is shouldering the brunt of this. And I also noticed some of the strange language in the presentation about impacted neighborhoods to the north and middle part of town. And there wasn't that language about the southern route. And it just seems like we too have, we have our residences, we have our schools, we have our parks, and it appears as well that perhaps the hospital back entrance would be impacted. And so we're just looking for more communication and knowledge in the community about this, and then hoping to get some way for the public to get involved and to comment on it. And so that's about all I have to say. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. If there's anyone else that would like to speak during the meeting, can you please raise your hand? I did not mean to raise my hand. Seeing no hands up, Dr. Henry, we can close the public comment period.
Okay, and now then, we would need to go on to the next agenda item. And I'm apologizing because my internet just went out in the middle of all of the discussion, so I apologize. But the next update is recognition of former Mayor Nakia Walker. And I'm going to be reading a resolution and then letting the board discuss and decide on adopting it. And it is called Resolution 1434, a resolution recognizing the dedication and effort of Mayor Nakia Walker in her service to the residents and HCV/CSRA program participants of the Charlottesville Redevelopment Housing Authority during her tenure on the CRHA Board of Commissioners. And here it goes. Whereas Mayor Walker was appointed to serve the CRHA community as a commissioner of the CRHA Board of Commissioners beginning in January of 2020. And whereas during her tenure on the CRHA board, Mayor Walker worked diligently to represent the needs of CRHA residents while ensuring the ongoing health and well-being of the agency. And whereas Mayor Walker's commitment to a resident-centric approach to the management of CRHA demonstrates the fundamental values of public service and true asset-based community leadership. And whereas the Board of Commissioners of the Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority wishes to express its appreciation for the admirable work that Mayor Walker has done on behalf of CRHA and community over these past 2 years, as she has sought to redefine our agency through partnerships with residents for the city and Charlottesville, HUD, and numerous supporters and stakeholders. Therefore, be it resolved and known by all that with much gratitude, the Board of Commissioners of the Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority do hereby recognize and formally commend Mayor Nakia Walker for her admirable efforts exercised on behalf of the residents of CRHA, thus benefiting not only those directly served, but the greater Charlottesville community as a whole. Resolved this 24th day of January 2022 by the Board of Commissioners. And then there's space for each and every one of us to sign. Discussion? Commissioners?
I think it's a good idea. She deserves our recognition.
A second.
Okay. So can I get someone then to call the question?
Would you like me to call the roll?
Yes, please, to see if whether we accept.
Sure. Commissioner Wicks,
Yes.
Commissioner Payne,
Yes.
Commissioner Parker, Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Goldblatt, Chair Henry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, well, it passes unanimously among those of us present. And so it will be accepted. Okay. And so then we want to, oh, I just want to say also, thank you, Nakia, for giving us a taste of what two-party government might look like. Anyhow, moving right on to the next HCV utility allowance update and resolution 1435. And I don't know who's going to be discussing that.
Yes, good evening, commissioners. Our HCV manager, Consuela Knight, will be presenting this, the two items. She has a presentation. The presentation is really short, so it's combined the utility allowance and the payment standard adjustment that we are recommending. So Ms. Knight, do you want to share your screen with the presentation or you want me to do it?
Okay, I can share.
Okay.
PowerPoint. Okay, can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. I have the display of metal going across the screen because what we're seeing is everything is going up since the pandemic. I want to state that the changes in the housing market for families under HCV program since 2019, rent and utilities kind of remain the same. In 2020, the rent and utility estimation of 5% increase. Now, since the 2021 eviction moratorium, we have been seeing an increase of rent and utilities, especially with utilities due to the families remaining home, doing virtual and things like that. So we have been seeing an increase of utilities. The next thing I wanted to discuss about the program, when we're calculating the family's rent, we using 30% of their income and total tenant payment. The total tenant payment is what we use to calculate the rent and utilities, which is considered gross rent. And we don't use an actual utility bill, we use an estimation according to the utility table. So with the 30% plus utility needs to be below the payment standard. So what we are asking for is an increase in our payment standard to give families more of a flexibility to search for a unit and inside of Charlottesville. I have the table, what the current payment standard is for a 0-bedroom, $949, 1-bedroom, $1,077, 2-bedroom, $1,266, 3-bedroom, $1,575, 4-bedroom, $1,965, and 5-bedroom is $2,260. So what HUD has done, they published a October 2021, they published a Charlottesville Housing Authority payment standard based on the bedroom size. What we are doing is we asking for the board approval because the payment standard had went down. If you look at the next table, which is in the document regarding the payment standard. The payment standard for 2022 has increased a little bit for a 0-bedroom. The payment standard for a 0-bedroom is $1,024 of the increase. The 1-bedroom went from $1,077 to $1,063. For 2-bedroom, $1,266, what is current. It's gonna, if we go by the table that HUD published, it is $1,264. 3-bedroom is currently $1,575. It's gonna decrease $1,572. 4-bedroom, $1,965 currently, and it's going down to $1,959. Okay. I'm sorry, I can't see the. I have to move.
Can I ask a question?
The 5-bedroom is $200 and $260, and it will decrease to $2,253.
Yes, Commissioner Wicks.
So even though, I just want to make sure I'm understanding right. So even though it's gone up by, what we've saw is that it's gone up by about 20%, the HUD standard has it going down.
Yes.
That's right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so what we are proposing, because we do not want to make the family's rent burden. Anything that the family pays over 40% of their income is considered rent burden. So what we are proposing, 105% of what the FMR, published FMR from HUD. So the 0-bedroom will increase. Let's see, $1075. The 1-bedroom, $1,116. The 2-bedroom will increase to $1,327. The 3-bedroom will increase $1,651. The 4-bedroom, $2,056. And the 5-bedroom, $2,366. So we are going up, we asking permission to go up to 105%, because at this time with the housing market, the rent has increased, and what we are seeing with our families are they becoming rent burden. And the housing market, I just want to say some of the apartment complexes that we are is mainly our vendors like Mallside, Rio Hill, Sparks of Charlottesville. And I think they are the main ones. They are going market rate right now. So basically we want to have some type of opportunities with assisting families in the city of Charlottesville. Okay, the next thing I have is the several factors that play a role in determining what the family can afford. What we, as I stated, we go by 30% of the adjusted gross income, the fair market rent that is established by HUD, which is the payment standard. The contract rent, we do not have anything to do with the contract rent. The owners decide they contract rent. What we do is we do the rent reasonable and determine if the rent that they requesting is rent reasonable. And then we would determine if it's affordable to the family's income. What utilities are responsible for in a particular unit? I have, I just want to go over the last bullet. Individuals may also qualify for certain deduction when we doing the adjusted income. If the family is elderly or disabled, medical expenses, or the family has dependents and childcare. Now, due to the families, they are having an increase in expenses also. And when we are requesting about the payment standard, we wanted to let you know the payment standard we requesting is only for new admissions. That is for families that's currently coming off our waiting list. Annual recertification, the annual recertification is done annually. So if the family is coming in, we bring them in every 12 months to complete their annual recertification, and it's only applied at the recertification. Now, if the family is relocating from one unit to another, then the new payment standard will apply. The payment standard does not apply for an interim. If they remain in the same unit, it's only at annual. The last thing is the utility basis. The utilities are considered the gas heat, electric heat, stove, other electric, hot water heater, water, sewer, trash. Unit allowance is based on the voucher of the unit size. So we do not give the utility allowance based on the unit size unless the voucher number match. So say for instance, if a family is a 1-bedroom family and they want to select a 2-bedroom, the utility allowance only applies for a 1-bedroom. And I wanted to, the utility allowance worksheet that is determined the unit is the apartment has 2 exposed walls, townhouse 3 exposed walls, and the 4 exposed walls is considered the detached house. And the last thing I have is questions and answers. If you had any questions for me.
I have one question.
Mhm.
So you were saying that the families are rent burdened because if this standard is like lower than what their rent actually is, it means, if I'm understanding it correctly, the family is paying CRHA their total tenant payment, and then CRHA is paying the landlord the other portion. But then our family's paying on top of that to the landlord as well to stay in a unit?
No, the total tenant payment is the income that is used to determine the rent. That's not of rent. It's,
And Commissioner Green, we don't receive any payments. I just want to make sure that's clear. For the voucher program,
Mhm.
the payments go straight to the landlord, and then CRHA also makes a payment to the landlord. The difference of the contract rent and the tenant's portion is what CRHA pays. So let's say the rent is $1,000 a month and the tenant only has to pay $100. Well, CRHA would make the $900 payment, and the tenant is responsible for making that $100 payment to the landlord, directly to the landlord.
Yeah, so I guess this means that when HUD's evaluation isn't high enough, there's simply not housing available at that rate, right? Like they can't choose anything more expensive.
right.
Okay.
So that's the reason why we requesting for the 105%, because with the market, the way it's going, we are not going to be able to service the families.
Mhm. And last year were we just doing 100% of the fair market rent?
Right, and at that time, at the 100%, it increased
Yeah.
last year.
Mhm. Thank you.
So the federal regulations allow any housing authority to go up to 110%.
Mhm.
At one point, we were using that 110%. HUD went through our tenants to look at the tenant rent and the contract rent, and we didn't have anyone that was using more than 100. So HUD requested that we reduce it back to 100 to get more vouchers on the street for other families to lease up. Now HUD is allowing housing authorities to go up to 120% due to the pandemic, but you have to have the money to actually do it. And we don't believe we'll have the money to actually go up to 120%. We have ran the numbers, and 105 is we can do that. Financially, we can do it and still lease up additional vouchers. But if we go up any higher, then we run the risk of going into a shortfall, which can affect the project-based vouchers that we plan to project-base at South First Street Phase 1 and at Crescent Halls, which could jeopardize the feasibility of both of those projects.
Are you having problems getting the community to accept enough vouchers at this time?
The biggest thing that we have an issue is if the family doesn't have any income. That is the main issue that we are having. If they do not have the income to secure the unit. But we are, some families are securing a unit if they have income. Anyone have any further questions?
Dr. Henry, Shelby Edwards from FAR does have her hand up. Would you like to accept her comment or question?
Yes. Ms. Edwards,
Shelby, you should be able to unmute now.
Good evening, Board of Commissioners. I have a few questions. One of them is, so if we increase this pay standard, would people who are current voucher holders be able to move? I thought I heard that the answer was no, but I wanted to ask, so I'm gonna pose it again. So if someone's currently a voucher holder and the pay standard goes up and they want to move to a different unit, can they move to a unit with that pay standard? And what's the answer?
Yes.
Yes, they can. Okay, great.
Mhm.
But only after their recertification. They can't move in the middle of their lease.
That's correct.
So if my lease started in December, I couldn't, and this gets approved tonight, I couldn't move until next January.
If you in a current HAP contract and a lease agreement, during the initial term, you cannot move. If you're in the initial term of your lease and the HAP contract.
Okay. And could you by chance swing on up to the utility slide?
Mhm.
Oh, a little more up.
A little more up.
One more again. I think it might have been slide number 3.
Oh, 3. Okay. Okay.
And can you go to 4 for me, please?
Oh. Okay, this is the payment standard. Mhm.
Shelby, I think the only utility allowance is at the end.
Okay.
Okay,
Remember
this.
what the question was?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm checking in the slide. And can you go to slide 6, please?
Mhm.
And the fair market rate is up top. And then the pay
Right.
standard that the proposed pay standard is the one on the bottom.
Right, that's from HUD.
And that's a correction. The payment standard FY 2022, that's the FMRs. That's the proposed, well, those are the FMRs for the new year. And then the next slide shows what we're proposing as the new payment standard, the new payment standard, sorry.
Gotcha. How often do people use vouchers that have a 0-bedroom efficiency studio type situation?
The crossings, we have quite a few, and we also have some in some other PHA properties where they have studio apartments. And a lot of developers are starting to build studio apartments. 600 West Main has several studio apartments. And I believe Darius Central also has studio apartments.
Okay. No further questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have one final question. Are you getting the city properties to accept more vouchers?
I would say through the CRHA program, yes. And not as many in the regular HCV program. With the CRHA program, we were able to get the payment standard increased even higher than in the HCV program. And that's just because the city can control the payment standard relatively easy by just the city council vote. Unlike HUD's system, which is not that easy to navigate. And it has a cap of 110% typically. So no, not as many in the city with the HCV program, but it's far easier with the CRHA program. I believe Commissioner Parker also has her hand raised.
Okay, Commissioner Parker, you have a question?
Yes, I was trying to have an understanding. I didn't hear much about the mobile home. The mobile home is $506 and it used 40% for a 2-bedroom.
Ms. Knight, you want to answer that or you want me to?
You can, because we don't really have mobile homes on our program. So you can, Mr. Sales.
So the federal government at one point did not allow mobile homes to be used, vouchers to be utilized in mobile homes. They have now made a way for it to happen, but they use a really low payment standard. And so it's 40% of the 2-bedroom payment standard.
Okay, what did that mean? I mean, can you kind of explain it to me, please?
It's 40% of the $1,266. That would be the payment standard for a mobile home.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Oh, no problem.
So at this point, do you guys want to read the resolutions?
I can.
Okay.
CRHA Resolution 1435, resolution adopting revised Charlottesville redevelopment and housing authority utility allowance for Section 8 housing choice voucher program for year 2022 through 2023. Whereas Charlottesville Redevelopment Housing Authority operates the Section 8 housing choice voucher program within the guidelines set forth by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Whereas the CRHA has a duty to review agency-wide utilities consumption and adopt utility allowance rates according with the Code of Federal Regulations. The CRHA have reviewed the utility allowance schedule and determined that best practices will be to follow the utility allowance schedule set by Virginia Housing Development Authority, VHDA, which study and rate shall be used to calculate utility allowance for CRHA and any excess utility charges pursuant thereto. CRHA had conducted an annual review of its agency-wide utility consumption and utility allowance rate and satisfaction and requirements of the Code of Federal Regulation. Now, therefore, be it resolved that CRHA by any through its officers hereby adopts the attached utility schedule into the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program effective February 1, 2022. Resolved the 24th day of January 2022 by CRHA Board of Commissioners.
Okay, thank you. I guess before we vote, is there any discussion, commissioners?
I have one question. Now that we've read the resolution, is it because the utility schedule and the utility standard is kind of nestled within this payment standard?
Right. So what we do is the gross rent and the utility allowance schedule is calculated to see which one is the higher of. Is if it's the contract rent and the utilities, or is it the payment standard? If it's less than the payment standard, we use the utility allowance in the contract rent. If it's over, then we use the payment standard. They
Okay,
can-
thanks so
families.
much.
So in essence, this would stop the tenant from being charged too much utilities versus.
Right,
rent.
too much rent.
Okay.
And what we do is when we doing the calculation, it alert us, our software alerts us if it's get ready to be 40%. Because we can't, with relocation of a family or they being admitted to the program, HUD will not let us move the family into the unit if it's get ready to be over 40%. But we are really looking into the families that's currently being assisted in their unit. So when we do their recertification and the owner's asking for an increase of the rent, we're trying to prevent them from being rent burdened because of the market.
Sorry,
That's the biggest factor right now.
But we can control the rent, but can we control the utilities? If it's not included in,
The utility is a table that we go by what the utilities are. Now, some of the units that we have 2 apartment complexes don't really charge all the utilities. They increase in the rent. And that's Hawkwood and I'm trying to think the other property because it's they pay for the gas itself. But what I'm saying is what the market going the way it's going, they asking for a rent increase if they continue to stay in the same unit.
sorry, one
Is
more.
this based on inflation or?
Well, that's a part too regarding inflation and material and things like that. And then some apartment complexes are having a hard time of getting back rent also. So
I will add the back rent issue is the reason why a lot of landlords are charging more in rent. They're trying to make up for it by increasing the rents on everyone else. And Commissioner Wicks, I don't think your question was fully answered. No, we cannot dictate what the utility allowance is going to be or control how much utilities they use. So it's an average amount. And it's after a study is conducted by Virginia Housing to determine what the true utility allowance should be based upon the market itself and how much water, electricity, gas, someone of that housing size would use. So it's really just an average. And I believe maybe 2 years ago, we started using the utility allowances of Virginia Housing.
Thank you. That's where I was going. We can control the rent, but we can't control if they get a
But does
$600 gas
Dominion,
bill.
does Dominion offer discounts to public housing or to low income families?
I don't think they offer discounts, but they do have like certain plans. I believe it's not a payment plan, but it's a plan where you lock yourself into a average. But they tend to make it up. Like if you were to go over, they tend to get that money back anyway. So it's not like you're getting over on them, but they try to keep the price, the payment amount, so it's a flat amount. But they're definitely not losing any money due to anyone going over.
I have one last question. Is there a negative to us increasing this?
Yes. So HUD is not giving us additional money to increase the payment standard. We're projected to get additional funds next year in general due to increased funding from the Congress. And so we'll use those funds to cover the gap the increase that we're proposing now. So less families will be able to be assisted through this program because of this action. But the families that are assisted now will be able to continue getting assistance without having a harder time finding housing options that will accept the voucher at the current payment standard. And that's the other thing we have to remember. The payment standard is supposed to go down. So you already have families that may be leased up at the very top. So at the end of the day, they would have to come out of pocket additional money to continue staying in that housing unit, which will push them closer to being rent burdened. Dr. Henry, Shelby has her hand up again. Would you like to hear from her?
Yes. Why can't I see the hands on people? But anyway, go ahead. Shelby?
Hello. I do have a question. And I think Dr. Henry referenced this, but forgive me if I didn't hear it. Will this increase or decrease the ability for folks to rent in the city?
This should increase the ability of folks to rent in the city, but we're still not increasing the payment standard to the true market. So the true market is $200 or $300 additional to all of the payment standard. So really a one bedroom is renting for $1,300 and not $1,100 that we're proposing to go to. Hey, Consuela, can you pull up slide 7 so I can see what we're proposing?
Okay.
So we get closer to the market, but we're still not right at the market rate. So one bedroom really rents between $1,200 and $1,300. And we're only asking to go to $1,116. So all of these payment standards are off by between $200 and $300 each. So we're reducing the gap, but we're still not getting to the actual true market rent. So still families are going to have a hard time finding units.
Okay, thank you.
So do we want to vote on this resolution or send it back for more study or?
I'm happy to say we move to adopt the resolution.
A second.
Okay. Commissioner Wicks,
Yes.
Commissioner Payne,
Yes.
Commissioner Parker,
Yes.
Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Goldblatt, Chair Henry,
Yes.
it passed.
Consuela, would you like to read the second resolution for the payment standard adjustment?
Yes. Okay, CRHA Resolution 1436, a resolution approving the Charlottesville Redevelopment Housing Authority 2020-2022 voucher payment standard schedule. Whereas pursuant 242 USC Section 1437 C1, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, annually published in the Federal Registry, fair market rent, FMR, for each market are in the United States. And whereas under 24 CFR 982.503A1, the Housing Authority must adopt a payment standard schedule that establishes voucher payment standard amounts for each FMR area in the authority's jurisdiction for each unit and size. Whereas unit size is based on the number of bedrooms. Whereas the authority may establish the payment standard amount for unit size at any level between 90% and 110% of the published FMR for that unit size. 24 CFR .503B1I. And whereas the authority must revise the payment standards amount no later than 3 months following the effective date of the published FMR if change is necessary to stay within the basic range, 24 CFR 982.503B11. And whereas HUD has published the 22 FMR for Charlottesville City, which shall take effect on February 1, 2022. Whereas it had been determined that an additional increase in payment standard is necessary to keep the pace with the regional and rental market and trends and limit shelter burden. And whereas increased payment standard amount will firmly further fair housing objectives in the Charlottesville City region and surrounding counties. Whereas the FMR for efficiencies has increased and the FMR for 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, 4 bedroom, 5 bedroom units has decreased based upon the published 2022 FMR for Charlottesville City region. And whereas the authority has reviewed the current average contract rents for the unit under a housing assistance payment contract and has determined that the payment standard should be established at 105% of the published 2022 FMR for the Charlottesville City region and surrounding counties. Now therefore be it resolved by Charlottesville Redevelopment Housing Authority Board that the following payment standard schedule need to be adopted for 0, $1,075, 1 bedroom, $1,116, 2 bedroom, $1,327, 3 bedroom, $1,651, 4 bedroom, $2,056, 5 bedroom, $2,366. Resolve this 24th day of January 2022 by the CRH Board of Commissioners.
Thank you. Discussion? I'm just curious about something. Why does HUD set its standard below the fair market value?
I cannot give you a good answer on that one. I can't give you a good answer at all. They say they look at the overall market in average, but that can't be the case in the Charlottesville area. And one issue is they look outside of just Charlottesville. So we know surrounding counties other than Albemarle, rents are a lot lower that fall under the Charlottesville area. And so that could be a cause of it. But historically, everywhere, the FMRs are way below the market. And that's why families have a hard time finding units. When I got here, we had a success rate of 51%. So about 49% of the vouchers we put out were coming back because they were unable to find it, housing. Another reason they want to assist more families, but that could also hurt a lot of families who are unable to find units. So they call themselves helping, but they also do hurt a lot of families who are unable to find units in a compressed market like Charlottesville, where it pays a lot more to not have a unit accept a voucher. And so those are the conditions that we're competing against right now. So we're looking, and Ms. Knight is working on ways where we can get more landlords into the program. If it's an incentive bonus, which we were doing at one point, if it's just a little more education about the program and the pros about the program, because the program has a lot of benefits, such as like when a lot of families weren't unable to pay their rent, that was not a problem with this program. We were still processing rent payments, even when families were negatively impacted by loss of income. their tenant portion went down, but CRHA's portion increased. And we saw, I think it increased by about $60 per voucher on average. About a year ago is what we were looking at. So there's a lot of issues with the system. We're not going to be able to correct it with 105%. We're not going to be able to correct it with 110%. It's probably going to be something that's at 125%, which is where we are with the CRHA program. But HUD doesn't allow us to get to 125%. And financially, we would have to take back vouchers in order to make that happen. So we would have less families getting assisted if we went to that higher percentage.
I was wondering if it was to encourage their deconcentration thing with moving people out of the city.
No, because that would be the complete opposite. Because honestly, the areas where you want to, where they say deconcentration, you can't find a unit even close to the fair market standard. So if they really believed in deconcentration, you would increase the payment standard in those areas to encourage individuals to go out there, and landlords, they wouldn't have to reduce their rental rate so much in order to make it work. Right now, it does not encourage that at all. In fact, it does the complete opposite. It encourages you to stay in low-income areas just because you have naturally affordable units there, unlike in some of the high-income areas.
I was thinking about leaving town altogether, moving to cheaper village or something. But they probably wouldn't accept vouchers there either.
You'll run into the same issue.
Yeah.
Just like Lynchburg. Lynchburg has the same issue that we're having. No matter where you are, your payment standard adjusts. So if you're in a cheap area, your payment standard is way lower, but it's still not, doesn't match the market.
Okay. Any other questions, commissioners? Vice Mayor Payne?
Not
comment?
vice mayor, but no, I don't have any question. I guess one question that came to mind actually is, you said it would, like you ran the numbers on what was affordable in terms of setting that rate at 105% for like CRHA as an agency. Just was curious what those numbers look like and what it would take to get up to like 110, 115 or 120%.
I did not run projections to get up that high because we would have to take other things into account, such as us project basing vouchers. It would remove that possibility of us doing that, just because I think right now, the reason we're able to go up to 105 is we have the possibility of leasing up 20 additional vouchers. It would eat that up, that 105%. So it would go to the possibility of leasing up 0 additional vouchers by going up to 105. But what we are banking on is none of this is going to happen all at one time. So it's going to happen over time as individuals start to do their recertifications or new admissions, which we won't have many except for, I think we have some mainstream that we need to lease up, correct, Consuela, and some emergency housing vouchers that need to lease up. But I don't think we have any or many tenant-based vouchers that are on the street that would be impacted by this. So that's why we're able to do it, because we have 20 vouchers that need to be leased up that have not been put out on the street yet.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Parker, do you have anything to ask?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. I move that we accept the resolution as read.
Second that.
Okay, call the question to vote.
Commissioner Wicks,
Yes.
Commissioner Payne,
Yes.
Commissioner Parker,
Yes.
Chair Henry,
Yes,
Commissioner Green.
she voted yes, but she had to walk away for a while.
Okay, resolution 1436 passed
Okay,
Thank
thank
5-0.
Okay, so moving right along, we will be hearing from the finance director for an update.
Hello.
Hi.
I do want to let the board know that every month we have a hard deadline with HUD on the 22nd, and it's pretty difficult to get our financials done by then. I'm hoping to shoot for the 15th. I actually have done that for quite some time. And then once they're done, we can I work to get the reports out to the board. So it's typical that they're not going to come with the packet, and I hope that that's okay. Continually work on an earlier date, but for now, I'm happy to be able to get you current ones at least by the meeting time. So hopefully that's acceptable. Oh, I lost my notes here. 1 second. So there was not a lot of out of the ordinary activity. I do think if you focus on the month-to-date numbers in total, or if you look in really any of the cost centers, any of the individual properties or programs, the month-to-date is a little bit high because the December has the oddity of having that extra payroll. There's 26 pay periods in a year. Most months only have 2, but twice a year there's a third payroll. The budget was never done to reflect that additional payroll. We will going forward. We know when it happens. It's done, it's easy to calculate by the calendar. So this past fiscal year, it was July and December where the third payrolls hit. So the numbers are a little bit inflated if you were to look like month to month on the payroll issue. We've talked a lot about the shortfall, the one-time revenue with shortfall funds and PPP money. The PPP money is done. It is in there this fiscal year. There was $129,000 put towards primarily the COC in administrative salaries. So that expense was pulled out. And there's, I believe, around $550,000 of shortfall funds in this budget year to date. There will be nearly an additional 100,000 that'll come in next month. That'll help us out too. So that kind of goes to the positive bottom line. I'm trying to think what else happened. The big thing was on our monthly, or I guess bi-weekly HUD calls, we've been hearing it that there was CARES money available to this organization. And on the public housing side, there was a limit set. And as you spent it, you could request to get those funds. On the HCV side, they gave it all to you. And we didn't spend it as of the end of the last fiscal year. We had $68,000 left. So it's pretty specific HUD guidelines on what it can be spent on. I think, their regulations were dating back to the early days of the pandemic when they're like, buy a lot of hand sanitizer and face masks. And obviously those weren't large expenses for us in the relatively recent past. Maybe they should have been, but we did have plenty on stock. I shouldn't say that. But so we were able to identify some lines that fell within the parameters. And we were able to utilize all that funding. If we didn't, we would have to give it back. And John really, really didn't want to have to do that. So we were able to spend it. And the HCV program, the Rent Cafe program is the interactive piece of it that ties right into our, really our whole accounting and It's called Yardi, and system that we use to handle all of our transactions in public housing and HCV. That was a big piece of it, along with a vehicle for HCV, because they're constantly doing inspections and incurring mileage there. And there were a bunch of other miscellaneous line items. We are updating wiring and connectivity in each of our offices, but the HCV office probably needed it the most. And we were allowed to charge rent or to pay rent. The HCV program was allowed to pay rent against the CARES money, and that money went in as revenue to the 6th Street program community. So that was an area that we were focusing on towards the end of the calendar year to make sure that that money was spent. And I'm not sure that I had too much else to add to that. I don't know if anyone has any questions or if we need to put the financials up there. I think that's about it. John, if you have anything to add, or if there's any questions.
I definitely don't have anything to add, but if we need the financials up, I can pull them up.
Our audit took place in December also, which obviously was a very time consuming in preparation for my department, and the programs too. They had to pull files for on-site review. The on-site piece of it was done. There's still some pieces continuing. We have gotten requests for our financials and they're not completed yet. We're working with the auditors. They're continuing to get schedules and information and documentation from me and some of our other partners. Like the recent one today had to do with Crescent Halls and the LITEC program and construction and development project that's going on there. So hopefully they will wrap it up soon. I'll be happy when it's done. And we're moving into the budget process within the next few days, actually. So. I think that's it.
I had a question. I'm sorry, my internet is still going in and out on me, so I apologize for some.
That's
but
okay.
I think I was looking at a financial page that was showing the monies owed by units. And it seemed like there was a lot of money that the different people living in units were owing or something.
Not on the report that I provided.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, on the public housing report, that's the report you're talking about, Dr. Henry. Give me 1 second. Let me pull that up. It is extremely high. I'll start by saying that without even looking at the total number. I believe it's over 100,000 now.
It blew my mind.
Yes, I mean, within several months, it has skyrocketed to that dollar amount.
What does that mean?
It means that we have roughly a third of our public housing residents not paying their rent. And CRHA is not receiving, so we're not receiving the rental subsidy on it, which negatively impacts the overall financial standing of the housing authority. You do not show it in, Councilor Payne and I were talking about this during our meeting. Typically, when you have a very high tenant accounts receivable, it reflects in your budget. And it's not reflective in our budget this year due to the shortfall funding. That has been able to mask it a little bit. But if it continues at this rate future years, you would definitely be able to see it in. HUD is calling it out at every meeting. It's asks about like, what are we doing to address it? I'm pulling it up right now.
John, I can add something to that too.
Go ahead.
So on the financial statements that I've provided to you, there's a line item for tenant rent. It's actually on the very first page it's the second line. And that's That's the rent that we're receiving from people in our communities. That number is as if everyone paid all their rent. It's due to us. It's what we're owed. It's what we're allowed to claim. So if in any given month, or on this month in particular, we were able to charge $86,625 of rent is the tenant portion. Year to date, that number is 796,000. So what'll happen at the end of the the fiscal year, we'll look at the accounts receivable. It's now 100,000. If it doesn't get better, it's probably going to get worse. And if it's 150, we'll sit down with the auditors and we'll probably go through those accounts line by line and see which ones we would expect to recover. If it only ends up being 50,000, there'll be a negative entry and it'll go to bad debt and it'll reduce this number from, say we end up at 1 million, and it would reduce it down to 900,000. That's the impact of it. So it isn't affected month to month. To be honest with you, as we look to fill the sustainability, no, is that what's the position, John? The
Stabilization.
Stabilization coordinator position. That's a position that we need to be able to work, needs to work kind of liaison between finance and working with the residents and their accounts and eviction prevention, of which payment is a piece of that, to make sure that we kind of don't let these snowball. Right now, that position is vacant. We haven't really, and so much of the year, the rent was covered. If you look at the fiscal year up till October, I don't know, is 3 or 4 of the 6 months between the start of the fiscal year and the fall were actually paid through other sources, primarily the city. So what that means, to be honest with you, is that $100,000 receivable is actually worse than it looks, because it's not based on a full year. There was several months where the rent was covered. So it accumulated pretty quickly on just the past few months from the fall.
So like Mary Lou just said, this is 5 months worth of tenants being fully responsible for their rent. We covered, or the city through grant funding covered April, May, and half of June. We still had some money available, and so in other sources we're able to cover some rent in July, I believe. But after July is when the tenants became fully responsible for their rents, and it's been really bad for our TARs ever since then. I mean, we went from, I believe the first month it was 15,000 to 45,000 to 80,000 to 100,000. We received $25,000 worth of commitments from the state to cover some of the past due rent, and now we're back over 100,000 again. So on average, about a third of our residents aren't paying rent a month. Right now, there's over 100 tenants that are past due.
Will you be bringing something to the board at some point in terms of how this is going to be resolved, or you've already pretty much mentioned the different programs that you've adopted?
We're working through this. We knew it was going to be an issue because it was an issue last year. We thought we would have a good system in place where we had an eviction prevention coordinator that was actively looking for rent relief and submitting applications as families became delinquent. That did not happen. In August or in September, as of September, I think we only had 1 application submitted. In October, we had a total of 3 applications submitted. But since then, the housing staff has submitted applications for everyone that owes housing authority more than $500, which is a significant amount of people. I think the largest delinquency we had was over, I want to say it was over $10,000. It was a flat rent tenant who had not paid rent. And as we go back and look, hasn't paid rent since the pandemic started. But their wages have not changed, because we also track that. Anytime that someone loses their job, they can submit an interim change, and we will reduce their rent based upon their income. And so we've tracked a lot of these, and there have not been changes, but they have stopped paying their rent. So we will have a eviction prevention coordinator, housing stabilization position. We will have that filled, and that person will be working with the families. There's a policy now where the housing authority has to work with the families before moving forward with any eviction proceedings to at least get them to attempt to get the rent relief program and get the paperwork signed and turned in. If the families are not willing to work with us to do that, then we are allowed to move forward with evicting families. We have not done that. We've made a lot of phone calls, sent a lot of notices out, and that has been the extent of our enforcement. If numbers continue to go the way they are going, we won't have a choice but to move forward with evicting families in order to try to get the rent paid. That is the absolute last resort that anyone wants to go to. But HUD would not allow us to continue running this program if we're not collecting the rent. That was one of the things that we were identified in the audit as the housing authority having poor management because they were not collecting rent. And so we have to make sure that we are attempting to collect rent. And if we're not collecting rent, we are moving forward with enforcement. What enforcement looks like, it's going to be a multitude of things that we're still working through, but it will have to include evictions.
Okay. Anyone else? Questions?
I have a question that's a little bit more like zoomed out than just these finances. I know when we were talking about Crescent Halls and how those units were changing from public housing units to some more voucher units. Hopefully I've got that correct. Like we just were talking about how the vouchers have a certain highest limit of what you guys can pay for it. Is HUD changing that same reimbursement for 2022 for public housing units?
No. No, HUD really, they will adjust our operating funds, which we have not received that dollar amount yet.
Okay.
We have to submit our reports to HUD. I believe it's in the middle of February. And they should then provide us with a estimated operation funds for each AMP.
If you keep going down, John, Crescent Halls is there on its own. It might be towards the very end. I'm not sure if it's
No,
in
I think
as 2 or 9. Oh, there it
It's
is.
9, it's right here though. And so this is what Crescent Halls currently looks like. That will drastically change as we've moved the last resident out as of Saturday. So the building is completely vacant. But what I wanted to point out was the operating fund. So this amount right here that each AMP gets will change. It changes yearly based upon occupancy. So previous years, the Housing Authority operated under very low occupancy numbers. That has changed. The only site where we have current vacant units South First Street, which is getting demolished, so we're leaving those vacant on purpose. We have 2 at 6th Street, which we're working to turn, and we have vacancies at West Haven. We only have, I want to say, let me not say, and let me just pull it up. We have a total of 21 vacant units. 13 are at West Haven. 6 are make ready, which means they count against us as active vacant units. So the true number at West Haven, where we're not getting any money for, is 6 units. At one point, that was a total of 26 units that we were not receiving any operating subsidy for. So now we are only not receiving operating subsidy for 6 units. 3 of those units are at the final stage of being prepared to rent. I believe after the inspections today, the property manager said 1 is ready, everything's done, it's cleaned. 1 was getting its floors buffed today. And I believe the property managers found some cleanliness issues in the 3rd unit. So those will get addressed this week. And then those units will be ready to be occupied. We have 7 units that are offline. We don't receive any rental subsidy for them, but we do receive operating subsidy for them. HUD recognizes those units are in need of a lot of work and it can't get done in 2 weeks. So HUD allows us to take those units offline. They will continue to give us operating subsidy for those units, but they will not. But of course, we're not collecting rental subsidy. Our average rental payment is $247, I believe. So we are losing money with those units being offline, but we are also not having to pay larger utility bills, because in public housing, we also do cover the utilities as part of the rent. At South First Street is 6 offline units. They are demo disposed, so we're not touching them for new families to move in. At 6th Street, there's 2 units. 1 is make ready and 1 is offline. I believe we had a ceiling fall in from a water leak that had went unaddressed for months. So we had to move that family into a new unit that we had just turned. And so we took that unit in as a vacant unit and took it and put it offline. Hopefully that addresses that question. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe I just added it, made you think of more questions, but that's fine too.
I guess just like the numbers question is that operating subsidy? Is that anywhere close to what you guys are getting for the HCV vouchers? Or is it
No.
like nothing?
Not even close. It's like half. So a lot of housing authorities are getting out of the public housing business just because the money you get from a public housing unit is roughly half what you could get for a voucher unit. So a lot of housing authorities are taking their public housing and converting them to voucher units because housing authorities are allowed to do that. So they're doing that to increase the operating in the feasibility of that development in the agency. We are not doing that. We're mixing. We're going to, so like at Crescent Halls was 100% public housing. Now it's 53 public housing units and 52 voucher units. So the voucher subsidy you're going to receive, it's really going to help that property financially over a long term, unlike where we were a year ago, where Crescent Halls was losing on average $250,000 a year. It took the housing authority to transfer its capital operating funds each year to Crescent Halls in order to make it stay afloat.
And those are going to be project-based vouchers, is that correct? So they'll stay in the building, they'll never walk away?
That's correct. They will be project-based. We really don't know how many will truly be in the building yet, because we were forced to use the project-based vouchers to provide them to the families that were living in the west wing of the building after the water flood, the pipe burst.
Anyone else? Any more questions?
I have one question. Just being new, like you mentioned the one-time funding. When will that run out, and what is the size of sort of how much will have to be made up once the one-time funding goes away?
John, if you want to scroll up to the first page, that's the combination. And John can speak to the shortfall funds methodology probably better than I can, but HUD makes it available to us. Go up to page 1, all the way to the top. On our fiscal year. So we had funds available, I believe, from the previous fiscal year, and the last request that we did in November exhausted it. And so that 28,000 was a portion of the request that we made, which was like around 100, I want to say 125,000 for public housing, primarily wages and benefits for maintenance and admin staff in public housing. The remainder of it, they, I don't know, John, the terminology, but they approved us to be able to access this current fiscal year's funds. And we got the remainder of that request in January. So next month on the report, you'll see shortfall funds of about, I want to say it was $96,000 maybe was the balance of that request. So how they determine what is available to us and when we can use it, that I'm not as versed on.
I'll take that. So when the Housing Authority submitted its financial statements and position 2 years ago, it was deemed that the Housing Authority needed a bailout of, I want to say it was $653,000 in order to get the Housing Authority to $0. So the Housing Authority was averaging a net loss and had absolutely no operating reserve to cover any issues. So if there was a government shutdown, the agency would ultimately shut down as well, because there was absolutely no money to continue running the agency, running the public housing program specifically. So I'm going to pull down to just the public housing program so we can analyze that a little bit. So our monthly operating expense for public housing is $265,927. That was for this most recent month. And so the Housing Authority was a negative, I can't remember the exact amount, but it was negative over $100,000. And so the HUD looked at that and looked at our expenses and said, okay, well, you qualify for this dollar amount in shortfalls to get you to zero. And so you are sustainable for that year. Well, then we submitted our financials the next year, and based upon those financials, it was determined that in order to get to a month of operating reserve of two months operating reserve, the Housing Authority qualified for another shortfall of about maybe that one was 600 as well. It's about 630,000. And so HUD has a way of determining when those funds are accessible to the Housing Authority. So they set it up in 3 tiers. It's tier 1, which is last year was $120,000, $25,000. This year was $98,000. And so those are the tiers that you can draw down immediately. Tier 2A and 2B are then, there's some restrictions set based upon your current financial position. So when we submitted our financial position, I want to say it was in May, we were operating on a 2-month of reserve. So that opened us up to receive all of the shortfall funds from last year. And so those are the funds that you can see, 2 seconds. Though the
Any first, yeah.
543,000 right there. So that's a total that we've accessed this year after using the first tier at the end of last fiscal year. So I think we used it, and I want to say January, February, and March. So starting April 1, we were able to start using tier 2A and 2B, but only if we met the goal of HUD, which is to reach 1 MOR, a month of operating reserve. We got to 2. So that opened us up to all of the funds without any other restrictions. So we were able to draw down all those funds. The new set of money is over $500,000. It's 500 and I want to say 573,000. And those funds, we can actually access them now, but we're choosing not to. We're planning for the next fiscal year. We're at a really good position in public housing. Financially, we are, goodness, go slower.
Yeah, clicky. There you go.
So financially, in the public housing program, we have a surplus of $627,000.
So John, the one thing that I want to add too, if you can scroll over to the right just a little bit to show the budget column and then the difference. So here, I have a program that it takes the, actually part of this financial statement is it takes that period to date actual and it adds the budget for the remainder of the fiscal year. It's not really that useful early in the year, and the budget really, because it's just divided by 12 in the past, hopefully going forward, it'll be a little bit more meaningful, especially in the big ticket areas. But the good news on this is that, well, if you deduct the one-time funds of shortfall and PPP money, we would still be in a surplus area or a surplus situation at the end of the year. We would not meet the budget, but we wouldn't be in a deficit. And that is projected through the end of the year is what I expect is that we would have, if using the budget as the last 2 months of actual or 3 months of actual, excuse me, we'd have about $775,000 surplus. And if you back out the one-time funds of shortfall and PPP money, it still leaves us in a surplus situation. Short of the budget, yes, but relatively healthy. And the larger, and John, correct me on this if I'm wrong, but the larger our surplus is, the better it is for the reserves and our standing with HUD.
Absolutely. And so Mary Lou and I were talking earlier, this is going to change some more. I mean, we still have, I want to say over $200,000 in capital fund operating money that we need to pull down. And it's going to go to one of the amps, which is going to increase this by at least $200,000. And that's not including the next few months operating on a positive. So we'll be fine financially this year and probably financially next year. But the big concern needs to be the tenant accounts receivable being so high. I mean, it is impossible to look past that number because, I mean, if we had not had the rents covered the first few months, that number is easily $200,000 based upon the rents that aren't being paid and the high value, the dollar amount on those rents. We've actually reduced the number of units over time. So at one point we had 50 something units at Crescent Halls being occupied. We no longer have those 50 units and we still have a really high TAR. So we removed 50 units or so off of our list and we still, and the number continues to increase. So if you look at projections, I mean, we would easily be at $200,000 in TARs right now. There are some housing authorities, Richmond, I think they were close to $1 million. They're a lot larger than we are. But I mean, it's an issue everywhere. But a lot of them are dealing with it, and they're dealing with it through evictions. Something that we have not done and really haven't talked about a lot, just because we know it, no one wins with an eviction. The housing authority, we don't get the money back. And the family is out of housing that they could actually afford and are forced to go to other options. Once you get evicted from the public housing program, it removes you from the chance of using like a voucher. So you can't even go to a voucher program because you still owe a public housing agency rent.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that answered my question. I guess sort of the bottom line is, if you saw any risk that in a couple years there could basically be like a fiscal cliff, because of the shortfall funding and just how it operates.
No, I don't see a cliff. We're gonna get the TARS issue addressed. We have to. I mean, there's no way around it. And so we're gonna do that. And we continue to look at ways to cut costs. Mary Lou, I'm sure she could give you probably 15 examples without thinking about it of ways she's found waste, like helium tanks, unused services that we were paying for over the years. I mean, multiple years paying for uniforms that half of staff wasn't using, water services where no one was using it. I mean, and all these things just add up. And so we're constantly looking for ways to cut costs, but we're also looking for ways to increase revenue. So taking care of the units, we had a bunch of vacant units. Well, filling vacant units is the best way to increase funding. It increases your operating reserve and also increases your rental income. So we're looking to do that. We've shown that over time that we're turning the units and getting them filled. So we just have to continue doing that. We've directly invested in that. The board has made that a position and in an initiative. We've invested funds in there. We've more than doubled the maintenance staff to make that happen. So those things are happening. I don't see it being a cliff. And if I did, I definitely would bring that to you guys.
Thank you. And sorry, just one more question is, do you have a sense of when that eviction prevention position you referenced would get filled? And I assume that's also going to be a position that sort of really proactively connecting with people just to try to, have every opportunity to prevent eviction.
Yes, the position is posted. I can't say when it's going to be filled. It's really hard to hire folks nowadays. It's a competitive market. So we're trying to get it filled. We have some applicants now. I know I browsed it this morning and I know I found one that seemed like it would be a really good fit based upon the individual's experience. But we don't have a time frame of getting it filled. But I know Mary Lou wants to get it filled, and I know Melinda Height wants to get it filled. And I definitely want to get it filled because I think that's going to be one of the main ways we can reduce the tenant accounts receivable.
Thank you.
Maybe I missed it, but where do we stand now with regard to that troubled status?
We have a physical audit taking place March the 16th at West Haven. That will be the first step to getting out of the troubled status. And then we'll have a couple program audits, one in May and one in June, I believe. One for the HCV program, one for public housing. So after those audits are completed, then a final decision will be rendered.
Good job. Any more questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so now it's back to that same old issue that we've been going through in regard to committee appointments. And the first one is in regard to a vice chair of the board. And it is to be a community-wide person. And I can say that the three that I know, I would be happy with any of them. So I would, like to know if you guys want to volunteer or what, someone who would want to do that.
The vice chair runs the meetings when you're not able to, Dr. Henry?
Correct.
Mhm. I would be happy to do that.
Okay. We vote on it. I second that choice.
Commissioner Wicks,
Yes.
Commissioner Payne,
Yes.
Commissioner Parker,
Yes.
Chair Henry.
Yes.
Okay, it passed.
You would serve whenever I couldn't be here, and as well, it would be a training for whoever's next when I'm finished. Okay. Mr. Sales, you had some to add?
Yes, do you want to do the other committee appointments?
And that's what I was getting ready to go to. That was just the first one I was getting off of my chest.
Okay.
Okay,
Sorry.
and so that's okay. That's quite all right. I was going on to the next ones. And from what I could see, we have folks for the redevelopment committee. That's what I wanted to ask you about, Mr. Sells. Do you want to have someone from the city on the redevelopment committee as well?
We do currently have someone from the city, Alex Akefano, from the Community Solutions.
Okay, so we have
Department.
someone.
Yes, he's
Okay.
serving as a non-voting member.
Okay. Okay, so we didn't need anyone specifically to fill Mayor Walker's spot.
Mayor Walker's spot was actually a CRHA board spot. So
Okay.
Commissioner
Okay,
Maddie.
so we have the
spot.
board. Maddie has that one. Okay, we're good. Okay, so that one's full. And then the resident services, that one's full. And then the parallel track, someone told me that I had to be on that one, and I would like to have Mr. Payne to serve on that as well. And you can tell him what this committee is about, please, Mr. Sells.
So the maintenance and parallel track committee is the maintenance committee is where we have goodness, that's hard to explain. All right, so it's they're connected to redevelopment. So the parallel track is the initiative that the Housing Authority is undertaking to address the public housing units that are not going to be redeveloped within the next 5 years, 5 to 10 years. So it's Mickey, Madison, and Riverside, and the scattered homes. So Brandon Collins is working with FAR and the residents to identify what their priorities are when it comes to capital items, such as window replacement, AC installation, bathroom upgrades, kitchen upgrades, new siding, exterior upgrades to include parking lots, playgrounds, anything on the grounds. And then the maintenance committee, they're all the same. They're both on the same committee, but maintenance is really addressing, and what we're looking to address now is more of like the policy and process issues to ensure that, like, when a resident calls, the work order is entered, and then the work order is addressed, and then there's follow-up with that resident to ensure that all of their issues and concerns were addressed. So what I envision the maintenance committee as It's really a policy committee. And that's what all of these committees should be. It should be based on policy and not operations, because operations are what I handle. And so if there are operational issues, those should come to me on the housing authority end, where the maintenance and parallel track committee issues are really policy issues, where the board is determining the policy for the maintenance and parallel track. Hopefully I explained it well.
I think so.
Is that okay? Or you prefer to something else?
No, I'd be happy to serve on those committees wherever y'all think I could be useful.
Yeah. Okay. I think that'll be a good one because it's what they're going to do, and some of it might center around modernization too, as opposed to demolition. So, and maybe some of the residents might even want solar panels. Just being funny. Okay. All right, now Personnel Committee, we have Ms. Wicks, and that deals with the evaluation of the executive director, and as well dealing with some of the policies and procedures. This one doesn't meet as often, right?
We were meeting often.
Yeah, right around time for you. We
were meeting often before then too.
Okay.
The policy, our personnel handbook is really dated. And so we have a lot of work that needs to happen there. So I do think it needs to meet monthly instead of quarterly. We ran into a lot of busy times at the Housing Authority. So we have not been, I don't think we've met in a few months. But that is something that we do need to commit to in order to revamp the personnel policy handbook.
Yeah, I think we were meeting monthly initially, and then
You can blame it on me until I cancel some meetings.
I'm blaming it on you.
Okay.
I'll take it.
And then we
another
needed to wait
person
till we
on
had more
that.
people.
Anybody want to volunteer to be on this one as well?
Some very stimulating reading of personnel handbook.
No one else wants to, I'm willing to do it.
Okay, so we'll put you down for that one too. I think that John put you down for something. Let's see. Okay, Financial Committee. That's myself and Laura. We'll be meeting on that one soon. You know, guys, I will have a lot of meetings to go to. Okay, and then CF Strengthening Systems Project. That's a PMT. Okay, and this is the one that you're on already, John. Mr. Payne, I see your name on here. Right?
Okay.
Right, John? So it's myself.
I don't
and
know if
Mr.
he knew he was, I don't know if he knew he was on it, but
Well, I just thought I'd tell him because I didn't know he was on it either. I didn't know I was on it, but okay. Oh yeah, I did know I was on it. I guess PMT.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know I was on it. I've been to the meetings. I haven't missed any yet, I don't think.
Mayor Walker served on this committee as a representative from the city in CRHA, the board. This is a strengthening systems between CRHA, the city, and FAR. And so we have members of all three organizations fully involved in working on ways to strengthen our communication and collaboration between all three agencies.
Okay, so we don't need anyone else on there right now then.
That's correct.
Okay, okay. Then you tell me about this last one because I didn't know anything about the hack one.
Yeah, so CRHA has one seat, well, had one seat on the hack. I don't know if that's going to continue. And so we'll be waiting on the city council to determine how the board will or committee will be made up of for the hack. So I think at the last or one of the previous council meetings, I don't think CRHA had a permanent seat. So that may be removed in future presentations.
Okay, well,
But
let me know, because if it's something that's important, we want to be represented.
I do think it's important. I think CRHA and a couple other organizations, FAR being one of them, should have a permanent seat on the HAC. We are a board. The Housing Authority is a board that was created by the city. So in my opinion, and I've shared that opinion with some city staff, that CRHA should have a permanent seat on the HAC. And there was one other thing, Dr. Ray, I'm sorry to cut you off. During the redevelopment meeting, the admin meeting last week, there was a recommendation from the entire committee to add former Mayor Nikaya Walker to the redevelopment committee as an at-large position. We have several of them already on the committee. So it would go in line with previous history of appointing at-large positions to that committee.
Okay, but we had to vote on that, right?
Actually, you have the authority to appoint individuals to committees without a vote.
Okay, well, since it was
you can
approved
vote.
unanimously, then I'm adding her. Right?
Yes. I
Okay.
can't tell you yes, but you tell me yes.
Okay, yes. We're adding her to this. Do we all need to come down to your office to sign that resolution? Each person that's on it, you know, so they can get their signature?
Either everyone can come to my office or I can make visits to everyone. I do need to print it and get it framed up really nice. So we do have a little bit of time, but yes, I would either make visits to everyone or everyone can tell me when they can come to the office to sign it.
Okay, well, you may have to make a visit to get all these things we approved tonight signed by me, because Brown has decided that they're not finished or they haven't started or whatever with my car yet, so I'm still carless.
I can say I understand that position.
I don't understand it at all, but anyhow. That's where I find myself right now. So basically that does it for our committee assignments until March. The only other thing too, at some point, we want to have a retreat so that we can just go over some policy stuff and deal with ourselves as a board in terms of the bylaws and where we think they might need ways to be strengthened. Joy has her hand up. I'm sorry. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to conclude with that, and we're getting ready to go to public comment anyway. That's when we get to Joy. So anyway, let me just finish. Okay, so at some point we do want to have a retreat, and hopefully that will be when Miss Goldblatt is back among us. So I would say maybe we would wait until we get the person in March. Does that sound right to you guys? When we have a full house? Mr. Payne? You have your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to, about the Housing Advisory Committee, I'll definitely relay that to council about the desire to have a CRHA and FAR position on it. We really haven't even begun to discuss how we're going to change that. So I think definitely now is a good time to have that in the conversation.
Thank you. So now we can go to public comment.
Thank you.
And I think Joy had her hand up.
Yeah, I'm
Hi, good evening. Welcome, Councilman Payne. Looking forward to working with you. What I wanted to say was that FAR in whatever charter they had, FAR does have a permanent seat on the HAC. it represent the low income community. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, CRHA does as well, but I think the proposal from city staff was to change that to having no permanent seats with only, I think, 3 housing providers, maybe. I may be wrong on that. It was probably 3 or 4 meetings ago where it was introduced to city council.
And did they say who the 3 housing providers would be?
They would have to apply, and from those, the city council would select. That was a proposal from city staff. That was not what was approved from council, but that was a proposal from city staff.
Okay, that's all I wanted to say. Thank
Joy.
you.
The next speaker will be Kim Powell. Ms. Powell, if you unmute yourself, you should be able to talk.
I'm sorry, I did not mean to raise my hand. Apologies.
Oh, good. You have a good evening. Shelby, I saw you had your hand up at one point, but you lowered it. Did you want to speak? Shelby, you should be able to unmute now.
Good evening, Board of Commissioners. I just wanted to reiterate what Joy said earlier about Michael. Yeah, if you could follow up with city councilors about that, that is something that we definitely want to make sure FAR continues to have that seat on the HAC. Dee Dee Smith, if you are still on the call, could you reach out to me in regards to or anyone from that team in regards to the Ravenna River pipeline situation? I would love a little bit more information about that, but I will also try to reach out to you. Thank you.
If there's anyone else that would like to speak during a public comment period, please raise your hand. Seeing no takers, the public comment period is closed.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Third.
Commissioner Wicks,
Yes.
Counselor Payne,
Yes.
Commissioner Parker, Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Chair Henry,
Yes.
meeting's adjourned.
All righty. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Good night.
you.